said this 10 million times. Sales is a process. It's not hire a guy and he sprinkles a little pixie dust and by golly, it starts raining from the sky. It just never happens. It's horrible. I see so many people hire a sales guy and then it fails, and then they'll hire another sales guy. And then when we talk to the client, they'll say, well, I hired a sales guy. It was horrible. It was the worst experience. Let me go do it myself. And now they're not doing their real day job, which is being the president, right? So, the reason why most people fail in sales is there's no process, there's no understanding of the market space, you don't know what you're going to go after, you're not setting, per day, per week standards of both follow-up so you can get existing customer penetration or new.
Welcome to 7 to 8, our special series on 7 to 8 figure entrepreneurs. In this special series, I interview $1 million, some $10 million, and even some $1 million business owners who uncovered their twists and turns in their entrepreneurial adventure in order to help you to avoid the potholes and stick to the fast track. Welcome now to center stage, our next special guest. Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedlek, and I am super glad that you're here with us today because I am here with my most amazing guest, Robert. Robert, thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh my God, what an awesome privilege and an opportunity to join you today, Michelle. I'm looking forward to the show.
Excellent. So give everybody the highlight of who you are and what you do for business.
So Cogent Analytics is just 10 years old. We've April 22nd was our recognized 10-year anniversary. And we represent entrepreneurs and small business owners all across our country. I think we're in 34 states now. So astronomical growth over the last 10 years. It shocks me sometimes, but it's the whole principle of raise others up. Our growth is really because we built an amazing team, and that's probably our mission, our passion. That's what we do.
I love it. So how did you get into business development as your thing?
And it's broader than that. I got out of the military and I became an entrepreneur at a very young man. I then, after building and selling 3 different companies, I had a privilege of becoming a business analyst for about 11 years of my career. Didn't have alignment with my previous employer. I'm not going to, I don't want to cast too many aspersions, but suffice to say, I had a vision for what entrepreneurs really deserved. It's a hard journey being a business owner. And because I are one, as I always tell the joke, we focus on biz dev, organizational engineering, operational engineering, and measurement, hence the name Cogent Analytics, all for the purpose of generating wealth for an entrepreneur. A lot of people get stuck in the doing every day instead of actually generating wealth for themselves and their family. And it's a hard enough journey to do that much work and not see the payoff. So profit engineering is our number one, but it's really the 4 pillars that we talk about.
Nice. I love it. So let's get into that. What is it? What are those 4 pillars and what does it look like working with you?
So when we look at a company, we do what we call our discovery. That's kind of the MRI, working with a small business owners, and we do a deep dive. And I want to be clear with your audience because I know you have a lot of entrepreneurs. We do not and do consulting per se with every client. I will do a discovery, by golly, with every small business owner in America if I can. Because taking our clients and pulling them above their forest and really looking down on those 4 pillars, how are we generating sales? Do I have the right hats on the right head? Have I put the right leadership structure in place? Am I really maximizing my operations and being efficient in that? And then measurement is both operational measurement and financial measurement. How am I really generating a predetermined profit? So, there's a lot of connective tissue between all 4 pillars. And that has been our approach, is to really take a holistic view of the business and help entrepreneurs realize their dreams.
Awesome. So I can see this being immensely helpful in kind of the merger and acquisitions arena. Is that an area that you look into And if so, is there, do you see it being as problematic as I do? What's your take on the whole thing?
Yeah, so we do quite a bit of secession, whether that's internal secession to family members, sons, daughters, cousins, mothers, brothers, sisters, cousins. We also do a lot of external third-party representation to prepare a business if somebody is looking to exit on a timeline. And then more importantly, establishing the baseline value and driving to that target return. We have a bunch of strategic partners and attorneys and valuation groups and things like that. Internal to Cogent, we really focus on outside of just the standard biz dev org ops measurement. We also have a full-blown marketing department. We have an accountancy division. We have an analytics division. We have a sales arm that is specific to helping people generate good revenue. So I don't want to bore your audience with all the details, so I apologize. But yes,
I love it. I could talk about this stuff all day because it almost sounds like you're an incubator that's coming in and helping with every aspect of the business, as opposed to simply kind of, oh, there's an issue here, let's go deal with that.
We do 20% turnarounds. A lot of business owners get themselves into some tough spots. I think about that ratio of, 2 out of 10 businesses survive the first 5. And then by year 10, you can split that in half again. So, there's a lot of people that get themselves in some fairly tough spots. And, what I want to do with the entrepreneurial community is give them an opportunity to understand the business of the business, not just what they're great at. That's 20%. We have a lot of very large clients in the 100 million, 150 million privately held space. But I would say our sweet spot, Michelle, is that $3 to $30 million privately held, two guys as separate and apart partners or family members that went into business together. Because, that journey of being an entrepreneur, sometimes you can get lost in the forest and where your company should be making 10% or 12% or 15%. A lot of entrepreneurs find themselves making 2, 3, 4, 5% profit at the end of the year. And I've represented tens of thousands of clients. It's always amazing to me how many people put in a lot of hours for a little bit of return. And it really, it's those 4 pillars where we find it goes awry. And, it's optimizing the business. People deserve, if they're going to put that much effort in, to, take care of their family, and then take care of that family called their employees and all of their family. So.
Nice. When you're working with businesses, what are you finding is kind of their biggest struggle or the backlog that they're having to face?
I don't want to be redundant. It's funny. I'll tell you a story of a client that we have this week. Yeah. And it's 2 partners that went into business together. They were prior service guys. They were military. They had a little business engine, predominantly business development. But over a period of about 12 years, it's like a bad divorce. Their value systems diverted, how they saw their business diverted, and really getting them back to where they were communicating in a functional way and getting to good leadership and really dealing with the fact that their employees hated to work there, but didn't, even in a good economy, didn't feel like they were going to jump ship. Culture is so important in a business. You could take a great idea and turn it into an absolute nightmare in about 2.5 seconds without a really strong culture and good leadership. So, I could compare that to another client who's a hyper analytic, and he knew every single number in his business, but he did not use the information at his fingertips. And he'd literally done almost $100 million worth of business in 5 years and made 1% profit. So I want you to think about how profound that is, Michelle.
That hurts. That's painful. So I know that in my experience, partnerships and the dynamics that are going on there tends to, let's say, add a different flavor to business. Is there a kind of a time when partnerships just don't work and it's like, oh, you're thinking about doing that, don't do that, or is there times when it does work? Because even when they have that transition from one generation to another, you see that as a partnership, at least for a while, husband and wives getting together and working, or buddies getting together and working. What's been kind of your experience in that realm?
So, although my wife and I, I've built quite a number of businesses in my career, and I would say she's been my CFO 3 times, and I keep firing her, and she keeps coming back. But all jokes aside, I normally don't recommend husbands and wives as partners because people get married to be life partners, not business partners. And I've seen, in my experience working with 10,000 businesses, I've seen a lot of businesses kill a marriage. If your value systems don't align, let's set life partners aside for a second. A lot of teaching people how to communicate again, where you have that divergent goal system, or you have a senior partner at 51, 52, 53, and a subordinate partner, and how that communication works, and the divergence of roles and responsibilities, and being able to work from facts and truth, not how we feel. That's the cancer that you see in a lot of businesses, where communication breaks down, vision breaks down, planning breaks down, structure breaks down. And, interestingly enough, aside of the partners being affected by it, everybody that goes to work there is affected by it. So hence you see a dilution of profit almost 100% of the time.
Wow. So when it comes to their kind of, let's say they are working together and the company is working, they are functioning, they're getting data, they're not necessarily staring down their P&Ls, but what is it about kind of getting that data in particular and being able to use it in a functional way? So we've just been talking about partners, and all I can think about is there's going to be one that lives and dies off the data, and the other one is going by the emotional hanger. How do you kind of tie those two together and help them to figure these things out?
So a little sidebar to your last question: have a great operating agreement and have a great buy-sell agreement. It's kind of like a prenup.
Yeah.
You throw it in the desk drawer and hope it never has to come out. But, should it, all of those determining guidelines were talked about before you got a partner. But more directly, when you think about I think you need both partners. You typically have a guy that runs the, what I'll call business of the business. And then you got an operations guy that really makes it happen, operationally. Both personalities are important. The problem you run into is, you get paralysis by analysis with one guy who wants to look at every single digit and every single number. And, that usually flies in the face of the guy that's trying to get stuff done. That's why somewhere along the line in the history, long before me, the word key performance indicators, or KPIs, were developed. Measurement should be an empowerment exercise, not a cudgel. And I see so many companies go through this exercise of measure, which, listen, one of our critical pillars is measurement, but it's how do you develop key performance indicators, and how do you empower your people with clear communication, clear measurement, and an understanding of how that measurement empowers them to build their paycheck, their remuneration, their career growth, right? If somebody knows what's clearly expected, how it's measured, and then you incentivize them based on that positive performance, it's amazing how communication gets better really quick. So, 2 things: key performance indicators is meant to be key, not 47 different ways to measure 2 things. And, more importantly, once you have that measurement, is that you have a real conversation about how you plan and make the business better, right? You got it, getting that alignment and attainment between yourselves and your partners, because we're talking about partner in this example, and then more importantly, your leadership staff and the people that work. Sorry for the really long answer.
That's awesome. So let's talk about KPIs, because I think people get very confused about them. A lot of them think, I have a salesperson, here's their quota, that's their KPI, go do your job. So what are some of the most
destiny
vague
for failure?
Yeah, exactly. So let's go in that soapbox for a second. Give me what you got on that, and I'll remember my question.
Yeah, sales, I've said this 10 million times. Sales is a process. It's not hire a guy and he sprinkles a little pixie dust and by golly, it starts raining from the sky. It just never happens. It's horrible. I see so many people hire a sales guy and then it fails, and then they'll hire another sales guy. And then when we talk to the client, they'll say, well, I hired a sales guy. It was horrible. It was the worst experience. Let me go do it myself. And now they're not doing their real day job, which is being the president, right? So, the reason why most people fail in sales is there's no process, there's no understanding of the market space, you don't know what you're going to go after, you're not setting, per day, per week standards of both follow-up so you can get existing customer penetration or new, what I call hunter behavior, which is, shake a handshake, open the conversation. And just so I can throw out a pet peeve, sending out 10,000 emails to come do business to, 10,000 to get a 0.5% return and then not do any due diligence around what your potential target is going to do. It's just so horrible. Everybody that's listening to this today gets those emails and they go delete, 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 right? Good targeted business development is understanding who you're going after, being mindful of their busy day, trying to get an introduction, and then making it a personal introduction and setting specific quotas in and around what the behaviors that you're looking for. And then you measure those behaviors, because you get a lot of people that call themselves salespeople and they don't sell anything. And then you get mad at them and you fire them because they didn't sell anything. Well, I think the first failure is the entrepreneur themselves, because they don't understand sales to begin with. Selling is a process.
Absolutely.
Sorry,
and
now
I
you
know
got
a lot
me
of
on my
entrepreneurs that
soapbox.
should fire themselves.
Well, the world's going to do it for them if they don't, sorry.
Right. So let's talk about kind of vague positions where you're going like, I don't get, how am I supposed to nail this down that this is your job? Do you find that there are kind of some positions that are more difficult to be able to figure out what those KPIs are than others?
Yes, you most assuredly. Great question. It's interesting, especially in the entrepreneur land. You see it less in big corporate, but a lot of people will say, oh, I just need a job description. And the job description says, you need to do these 3 things. And by the way, anything else I tell you that I need you to do. And that kind of vagary isn't helpful for you. It's not helpful for the employee. And I'm not quite sure what you're going to measure from that endeavor, right? A job description actually is a breathable document. It's meant to define that measurement within the document, and it's meant to empower the employee, right? Remember, when you're paying somebody to fulfill a critical role and to execute critical tasks in your business, if they're not doing their job, you, the entrepreneur, get hurt first, right? So vagary is really not helpful. And even very experienced project directors that come to work at Cogent Analytics, it's funny to me how sometimes they'll go in and they'll build job descriptions on the first week of a project. And I always say, we'll do a little job description day dance, because that was their experience, right? Prior to coming to us. I think job descriptions are built towards the latter portion of a project once you understand the culture, once you understand the critical tasks going on in the business, setting key targets, getting input from the employee base, and understanding how we're going about improvement and getting buy-in, then building those descriptions with your people so that they take ownership of them and they have a voice in them. Because I always find that people, especially in today's world, want to be a part of a victory dance. They don't want to be just told to go to work. So, building that measurement can be, I was going to say is as an absolute, and I apologize. It really can be a daunting task, but it's not as nebulous as you might think. Once you can get that agreement on really critical tasks, you can always get to a very simplistic agreed upon measurement with your people. Your people embrace it, they own it, they execute.
Nice. Well, one of the biggest frustrations I hear kind of founders or entrepreneurs having is they have an individual, they have their tasks, they're really good at their tasks, and they go, okay, this is my output. I know what my output is. We're good. And it's like, okay, but can you think about kind of the breadth and width of you're going in here and things don't look right and maybe you should mention it? Or, yes, I'm doing my task, but is that really going to get us to the end goal? Like, how do you move your client or your employees from KPIs to let's really think about, is this the right thing to do? And should I be bringing this up with someone?
Yeah, so there's two ways to answer that question. Number one, you have to ask yourself, if you don't have some element of critical thinking in that person that you hired to do, because you're not hiring people to do a task, you're hiring people to do a role and responsibility, which typically is a fairly dynamic thing. People make recruiting and hiring about themselves and their own ego more than it is about being honest when we fail. I always tell entrepreneurs, it's kind of like fishing, right? If you're in a fishing competition, you got a 12-inch fish and everything less than 12 inches, you're not going to put in the well and you don't get to bring it in and be part of the competition. Well, if you've got a 10-inch fish, it's not going to grow in the well, right? Sometimes you got to go fishing again. And I see so many people hold on to really bad talent for an extended period of time, and it costs production. It creates a cancer. They're usually attitudinal. Be honest with yourself first about who you hired and can they do the job, not the tasks. Because if they're just task-based and they've got a job, they're probably not going to align with your culture to begin with. So that's a percentage of the answer. The other half is the really important spot, which is about leadership more than management. Entrepreneurs sometimes get caught in the thick of thin things. So they get caught up in the little really small things instead of looking over the horizon and thinking about where they're taking their company. And worse yet, they fail to communicate their vision to their people. So then you end up with a bunch of task-based people in your business because you gave them a job, you pay them a paycheck, and you ask them to do a task. That's really not your people's problem. That's your problem first. And sorry if I offend any of your listeners, but you really should look in the mirror and ask yourself, am I communicating my vision effectively? Am I communicating where I want to take my company? Am I communicating with that employee about what I really expect from them? And what does greatness look like in that role? Because once again, I didn't hire you to do a task. I hired you to be a thinker. I hired you to help me. And I'm paying you and I'm giving you incentives to do your role really well. You've heard me say incentives a couple of times. All of those should be performance-based, which allows the employee to take ownership and hopefully inspire some critical thinking.
So when you're working with your clients, you've had clients that have gone from like startups to $1 million to 10 million to 100 million. Let's talk about that. What do you consider to be the stepping stones of a business? And then we'll break them down from there.
So, there's always this startup, and almost invariably, if you've got $1.5 million company, the first thing that a client will tell us is 3 to 5. Mm-hmm. That is that first threshold is getting to $5 million. The $5 million guy will always say 10. It's almost a universal truth. The $10 million guy says 20. The $20 million guy says 50. And from that point forward, 50 to 100 really is that next journey. And we can get into the very large clients that are, they've already achieved that $100 million threshold. That is a big bounce to get into that 9th figure, and fundamentally, you have different behaviors between 8 and 9, just like you have different behaviors going from 20 to 50. Although I will say, Michelle, when we implement structure, strategy, practice, organization, hats on the right head at 20, that'll usually sustain you out to 50. It's the evolution of the human resources and processes that really fundamentally have to change at the different breakpoints. And that starts with the owner first. I would say that I was always the biggest bottleneck to every stage. I had to go through my first change before my organization could go through change. And a lot of entrepreneurs that we represent don't recognize that. Like that amazing skill it takes to build a 20, 30, 40, $50 million company. That's a different cut of human being. And I don't mean that to be demeaning to anybody and say that people that don't achieve it are less than, because you can be really happy with a $5 million business. But for the people that are striving for that, all of the interpersonal behaviors most frequently have to change at each of those breakpoints as well.
Well, and there's definitely it's undeniably that it's a mindset that has to happen first, because otherwise your actions aren't going to take place around it. But it can become, I get so comfortable in my position that I don't want to be uncomfortable. I certainly don't want to be uncomfortable losing a $5 million business if they perceive that that's the change that needs to take place. It's like, I'm doing everything right. I don't want to break anything. Let's just go, has been my experience. What is your experience of, let's start at the kind of the starting point and then work our way all the way up. Is somebody's just starting out, do they have to think about what do I need to do to run $1 million business? Or are they thinking about how do I get my first client? What's the easiest, best evolution?
That startup to about $1 million in revenue, let's be honest, the owner's going to wear every hat. They're going to touch everything. They're going to own every hat. And it's sheer will and muscle that gets them to that $1 million threshold. When you get north of $1 million, and we internally think about $1 million to $1.5 million and 10 employees as that startup phase. Then we take you through a more what we call traditional process when a client's achieved greater than the $1.5 million and 10 employees. Because oddly, we've done a lot of different analytics. I know I'm weird, Cogent Analytics, right? Go figure. That 10 employee threshold is really when the business is now grown beyond your ability to touch everything. So now the business owner has to learn to not just be a doer and begin to learn the skills of management. And by definition, management is on time and to standard. So a lot of times people will give away tasks, and we talked about it on your last show, and the tasks continue to fail all the way around them. So then they go back to the doing behavior, and it caps their business growth, and they can't scale. So there's a whole new series of behaviors that a business owner has to learn about. First, letting go, right? You got to hire the right person. You've got to train to a standard that you expect. And then there has to be that continued follow-up to ensure that it's on time and to standard. That's that 10 people threshold. And I always talk more about number of heads than I do about revenue. Sometimes you can have a $3 million distributor that's doing, $3 million with 10 people or 8 people. It's that number of employees where it becomes more than the owner can touch, taste, feel, smell. That's where the behavioral change really starts.
Absolutely. So then they build it up to that, let's call it 5 million and 10 people, say hypothetically. Then what are they looking at kind of as behavioral changes to be able to get it to, let's go with 50?
Yeah, 5 million, and we'll just think in the traditional sense, right?
Yep.
$1.5 million, 10 people. 5 million is classically 20 to 25 people. It's about 200,000 per head. Depending on the type of work you do, that can scale up, flex up, or flex down, but it's a good base. It's a good baseline. When you get to that next threshold of people, now you're really talking about middle management. You might have hired a bookkeeper / controller, and those are two wildly different things. You probably have hired an operations person if you're not doing it yourself. But that 20 to 25 threshold is where we start to see a lot of cultural dysfunction, because the owner still manages it like it's $1.5 million business. That is the psychological shift, is being able to let go and put systems, structure, process of accountability in place that gives them the ability to sleep at night. And I hate to put it in those terms, but that's true. Small business owners get trapped in that really dysfunctional wheel of, watching things fail around them because they fail to plan, they fail to communicate, they really have no structure in their business, they're not really measuring anything, they barely look at the financial statement, or they have their woohoo boohoo moment. They look at the top line and then they flip over the page to see if they made or lost money, and they don't look at any other reason in between. So that's the dysfunction going up to that $5 million threshold. 10 million is a much different journey. Like going from 5 to 10, now you're really talking about scaling your organization in a functional way. And that absolutely becomes about your leadership team, and that leadership team really owning their role and not, it's funny. I've been doing this for 21 years and I've seen tens of thousands of businesses. That is the magic spot. Going from 5 to 10, most business owners, if they can make it up to 5, that's where they get stuck. Maybe they get to 6, 6.5. They're making, if they're doing it right, they're making 10 points of profit. They make 650. They pay their taxes on it. They pay themselves 100.5, maybe 200. And then after taxes, they're able to take a little distribution once they've dealt with their debt, which is a horrible occurrence, by the way. People pay taxes, they pay their debt, they pay for growth, they pay for whatever CapEx doesn't end up on their balance sheet, and then and only then do they get a distribution. And so people, I meet small business owners all the time that are making 6-7% profit, and it's just a number to cover the first 4, and they get nothing. They get a paycheck. They work their ass off 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and all they get for that privilege is a paycheck. Now, maybe they've increased the value of their business, and you can say, hey, I'm going to get it on the come when I sell my company. But, that's a whole different conversation and a whole bunch of dysfunction.
Right. Awesome. Even though some people are feeling a little salt in the wound, that is why they're here when they're listening. So we're going to give you the good side to this in a sec, peeps. In a second, I'm going to ask you about a Cinderella story of one of your clients. But before I do that, we're going to take a quick break.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention. You do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap. They offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.
So I am super excited. Share with us a Cinderella story of one of your clients.
It's always difficult when people ask me these questions, because we always get testimonials from our clients, right? I shared with you before, Michelle, that sometimes we meet clients in a hardship position, and the turnarounds are always fun because you're having a positive impact on small business owners. And we can always say, I don't want this client to be another tombstone in the landscape of small business. That's my fight every day. That's my people's fight. The best Cinderella stories, however, for me, when you really change somebody's life, and I'll give you an anecdotal. About 7 weeks ago, we took on a client that had, it's not big. He's, $3.5 million of revenue a year. He started his business with he and his wife. So not to give the whole he and the wife story again. And this was his passion. This really was his dream, was to be an entrepreneur. He had a full career before he went into business. And, he'd done the corporate ladder. and he'd been promoted to that vice president role, and then one day he decided he was going to be an entrepreneur. And it's funny, in big corporate, you always have this huge structure around you. You've got all these people doing these things, and you've only got to be able to focus on doing your thing. And by golly, when you become an entrepreneur, you wake up one day and you realize it's me, myself, and I, Inc. for some period of time. And, by golly, everything is your job, and you got nobody to go to say, hey, by the way, what do you mean this isn't getting taken care of? So that this particular individual and his spouse, classically, she gets thrown in the chair to keep the books because she was the only person he trusted. And, she was a teacher, not a math teacher, mind you. She was a teacher for third graders, and he sucked her into the business to, hey, by God, baby, I, trust you. You're going to keep the books now. And, this company had struggled along, although it had good revenue and growth. Every practice you can imagine, right? From bidding and estimating to the work performance to hiring to, HR practices. I always say, well, I'll tell you a funny story. The client said to me, Rob, I mean, how am I going to fix all this? Have you seen all these problems before? And I said, well, yes, I have seen them all before, not necessarily in one place, but I have seen all these problems before. And this was, you tend to build a really warm relationship with your client. I know this was a sensitive moment, so I try to bring a little humor into it. Well, I'm happy to say, Michelle, 7 weeks later, and we will have this client, classically, we have our clients for a very long period of time. We normally do a life cycle journey with our clients for that first year so they don't digress to bad behavior. But, I'm happy to report that not only has he felt like he got his life back, he did that testimonial letter that clients do with us at end of engagements. But we had this very tearful video from this client about how it's not just saved his life, but it saved his marriage. Come to find out, they were having some challenges. And I'm sure there is a listener on this call today that's saying, well, holy cow, that's me, right? Because that's what happens when, the world sometimes takes control as opposed to us being in control of it. So I tell that story hopefully to share with people that, you should own your business. It shouldn't own you. It is something that you can achieve your dreams. Being an entrepreneur is the greatest thing in the world. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I've either represented entrepreneurs or been an entrepreneur. And now I have the privilege of owning a company that represents entrepreneurs, as I still am one. Don't get lost in the forest. There are people outside of your accountant that can help. Your accountant's a GAAP accountant person that files your taxes. We exist because we focus on a very holistic way on the family that owns that business, because you bring your personality to your business. And, sometimes when you get lost, you just keep doing the same thing over and over again and not changing behavior. That's called insanity. So hopefully that story helps a couple of your listeners think about where they're at in their entrepreneurial journey.
Absolutely. I'm sure you triggered a lot of people, and they're all going, how do I get a hold of you? So how do they start that journey with you?
Cogent Analytics is our website. It's, www.Cogent Analytics. Or you can call our 800 number, 833-4-MY-PROFIT. So 833-4-MY-PROFIT. We have advisors that field the phone and are more than happy to talk to an entrepreneur if they've got a challenge. We've got a lot of case studies and white papers and critical thinking items that will help. You don't have to call us. I'm not pimping your audience out for their business. If they want to pick up the phone and talk to a whole team of caring professionals, we're here. So Cogent Analytics, if you just want to do a little bit of research, if you want to get some information or some white papers or some guidance, we put a lot of thought leadership out there for people to use. Hopefully that inspires somebody should they need that content. And if it helps them run a better business, by golly, that's what they deserve.
Right. I love it. We will, of course, have all of Robert's notes in the show notes. So go ahead and scroll down, click on the links, open up in a new browser because we're not done yet. So, Robert, I get to ask you, at what point in life did you know you're special kind of crazy enough to think that you could become an entrepreneur?
Uh, almost right away. I got out of the military and I had my first job, and didn't know any better that was a job. And I had a vice president recruit me. I had my first little tingle of equity. I had 3% when I was 27 years old. And by golly, I thought I was walking on the moon. And then from that point forward, I'm old, fat, and gray now. So, at this stage in life, I think the count is 10 or 11 different businesses that I have built, open, run, am responsible for, or have sold successfully. That is not meant to be braggadocious. That's hopefully bringing some bona fides to this conversation about how to have a successful business in today's world.
I love it. Well, I know people are going to want more from you. You have been absolutely awesome. So any last words for our peeps?
No, Michelle, you're awesome. Like this, I got to tell you, I've done a couple of podcasts and this has been a blast. Thank you for challenging me and thanking you for putting me on the spot. So no more, no less.
Awesome. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And I know how valuable it is. Awesome. Peeps, this is Michelle Nedelec. Thank you for being here with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your friends. We love helping entrepreneurs grow.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.